Good morning and welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefing for community and faith partners. In today's program, the California SB4 author, California State Senator Scott Wiener, presents on the provisions and impact of Yes in God's Backyard legislation. A special thanks. This San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefing is supported by a grant from the San Francisco Foundation. Thank you. The important and ongoing work of the San Francisco Interfaith Council would not be possible without generous funding from congregations, corporations, faith-based social service agencies, foundations, judicatories, and supporters like you. Help us spread the word. Visit sfinterfaithcouncil.org to learn about SFIC programming and how to become a supporter. Follow SFIC on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to SFIC's YouTube channel to watch all of our virtual events. A bit of housekeeping. Today's program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. Questions will be forwarded to the host and answered time permitting. For closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and click Enable Live Transcription. And now I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thanks so very much, Trey. Good morning. I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this week's online briefing for community and faith partners. California Senate Bill 4, approved by lawmakers and signed by Governor Newasom, will reduce barriers that religious and nonprofit organizations often face when planning multifamily housing projects on their properties, such as local zoning regulations and the state's stringent environmental review process, which critics say can add years of expensive and red tape to the process. It will enable California nonprofit colleges and faith organizations, such as churches, mosques, and synagogues, to build affordable homes on their land and help alleviate the state's worsening housing shortage and homeless crisis. The bill will supersede local zoning rules that either prohibit or discourage this development and would bar opponents of the housing projects from using the environmental review law to slow down construction through litigation. Affordable housing advocates say SB4 could meaningfully bolster California's housing stock because religious and nonprofit institutions often have excess land available for development, usually in proximity to community resources such as transit and job centers. The bill's author, California Senator Scott Wiener, is this week's SFIC Online Briefing for Community and Faith Partners featured presenter, and will discuss the legislation's provisions and potential impact on housing for our state. As we do at the beginning of each of our programs, allow me to read our interfaith statement. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are invited to offer a prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other, that we might better understand the multiplicity of faith traditions in our city and in our world. It gives me great pleasure to introduce friend and colleague, the Reverend Odette Lockwood Stewart, the pastor of Park Presidio United Methodist Church. Pastor Odette has come to us from the American Church in Paris, and she's come to San Francisco. She's returned to San Francisco, I should say, because she has a rich history with us, in order to help transform the property at Park Presidio United Methodist Church into affordable housing. I had the good fortune of touring the site with Senator Wiener and the leadership team of her community, and their intentions are are immediate as well as great to help respond to our city's housing shortage. Pastor Odette, we welcome you and ask you to ground us in this reflective moment.
Thank you, Michael, for inviting me to share these reflections on housing in San Francisco and, yes, in God's backyard. In the Gospel of Matthew, in the 22nd chapter, we read that a lawyer asks Jesus, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Living and working in the third most expensive city in the United States, housing costs are high. There's not enough housing, and an average of 523 days just to get a project the go-ahead for housing. There's an urgent need and a mandate for affordable housing, a moral imperative informed by faith. 177,000 of our neighbors in California experience homelessness and a 17-year gap in life expectancy. And workers in the city cannot live in the city. This year is the 35th anniversary of the San Francisco Interfaith Winter Shelter. We celebrate providing essential temporary shelter as a foundational mission of this Interfaith Council. Now may we lead our city with others to move to the elimination of homelessness. From debating public perceptions and treatment of vulnerable persons to addressing broken systems and root causes of that vulnerability. From a history of discriminatory practices and policies that have borne bitter fruit to equity-based, person-centered co-design. From commodification of housing to housing as a fundamental human right. This week, a $4 million media campaign funded and launched by corporate leaders in advanced San Francisco seeks to address negative public perceptions of problems in San Francisco. The title of this campaign is "It All Starts Here." Its launching 2-minute video ends with these words: "If it changes everything in an instant, the chances are it was dreamt up and built up here in San Francisco. It all starts here." Private market cannot provide every essential good. As faith communities, let us dream together, make plain a vision together, and build the reality together of an innovative, resilient city of neighborhoods where every neighbor can flourish in a place called home. I invite you to join me in prayer. Gracious, ever-loving God, you invite us to participate in new creation. Help us to listen deeply, to learn and take inventory of what we have and have to do, and to reimagine what we might do together to welcome all your people home. We give thanks for the promise of this bill and pray for the fulfillment of that promise in the city of St. Francis and throughout California. Help us work for safe, clean, just, affordable homes for all our neighbors. Help us to love you with all of who we are, with every resource, and love our neighbors as we love ourselves. I offer this prayer in the name and in the way of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Pastor Odette, as we await Senator Wiener's arrival, and he should be on any moment now, I was wondering if you could just take a moment to give us a view from the pew of what you're doing at Park Presidio.
Well, Park Presidio has a long heritage in San Francisco. Its roots go back to the first Methodist Episcopal Church of Yerba Buena, when 6 people gathered in a living room in 1847, before San Francisco was San Francisco and before California was a state. And that the moves and the rebuilding of not just the property, but the community again and again, and the social justice witness is an amazing legacy that we want to live into. So in 2023, we're starting with a bold vision, a small but growing congregation, and hopefully and faithfully the power of the Spirit. So we're very excited about it. It's on in the inner Richmond, a very high resource area, and at Gary and 7th, and just before the park and the Presidio. And it's an exciting moment to be there.
And maybe you could just share why you.
Why me?
Yeah.
I have no idea. God has placed us together for a reason, and we're figuring it out. I am a retired clergy, 45 years in ministry in the United Methodist Church. And I was invited to do this by the then district superintendent, Stacy Current, who's now at another church in San Francisco, Temple United Methodist, who had a vision, and the people in the church have a vision. And so it seems, even though we're starting small, we're making great strides. And honestly, there are about 3 or 4 miracles that have already happened. So grateful to be there.
Excellent. I just received a text from the senator. He's actually been on, but I haven't seen his face there. So without further ado, I did want to let everybody know our time is of the essence today. We have Senator Wiener till 9:15. We had an amazing celebration of the signing of this bill, which he authored. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome the senator and say thank you on behalf of the 800 communities of faith and religious institutions for this inspired legislation, which is going to make it easier for us to build housing. Apologies, I didn't see you on the.
Yeah, it's okay. Apparently, the Interfaith Council has renamed me for the so okay, good. I've been renamed correctly. Thank you.
Okay.
No, thank you for having me today, and I want to thank the Interfaith Council for all of its amazing work. In general, but also its support for this legislative effort. This is actually the 3rd time that I introduced this bill. I did it for the first time in 2020, the 2nd time in 2022, and now 3rd time to charm. And the Interfaith Council has been with us every step of the way as part of a huge faith-based coalition up and down the state that I had never actually seen the likes of it before, in terms of the intense grassroots faith-based coalition. And my colleagues would come to me and say, oh yeah, the group of 20 people came up to me at a community event over the weekend to say how important it was to vote for your bill. So it was a very, very well organized and authentic coalition. So as SB4, and I'm just so grateful to my colleagues and to the governor for signing it. This is a game changer kind of bill. We know that we need millions of affordable homes in California. So we're short millions of homes in general, and within the millions of homes that we need of all income levels, probably 1.5 million are below market rate that we need for homes for working class people, for low income people, for low income seniors, for emancipated foster youth, for formerly homeless people, and so on and so forth. And one of the challenges that our nonprofit affordable housing builders face is getting the land that they need, access to land. And right now they typically have to compete against market rate developers, and in a place like San Francisco or other high cost areas, and increasingly the whole state is high cost, that is a real challenge. So what SB4 does is it effectively dedicates, according to the Turner Center at UC Berkeley, up to 170,000 acres of land effectively dedicated to affordable housing. This is land owned by churches, synagogues, mosques, other religious institutions, and by nonprofit colleges. And not all of that is going to be developable, but we know a chunk of it will be, and that might be a church that has a parking lot that's way bigger than they need, or has buildings that they're no longer using, or just has excess land. We know there are even in tiny little 7x7 San Francisco, we have hundreds and hundreds of religious institutions, many of which have land that they could use for affordable housing. And the bill is very elegant. It basically says that if you qualify, your land owned by a faith institution, nonprofit college, the land, and I will say before I get there, that many churches and other religious institutions have wanted to build affordable housing for years. And some have been successful, but very few. And the reason is that land is typically not zoned for residential, or if it is, it's zoned only for single family. So it would have to be rezoned, which is a huge, long, controversial, expensive process that may be impossible, because you may have cities that may not want to rezone it. And we know that this land is disproportionately in higher income areas. And so those tend to be the areas where people are most empowered to oppose any and all new development. And then even if the land is zoned for multi-unit, you then have to go through a discretionary process with appeals and hearings and lawsuits and abuse of environmental laws and so on and so forth. So the law automatically rezones the land for affordable housing for multi-unit. It's typically keyed off of the local height limit plus 1 to 2 stories, depending, at density levels that will support affordable housing that'll pencil out. So it's automatically rezoned. There are some differences between land that's in purely residential area versus mixed use and commercial areas. And then the project is automatically approved if it fits within all the criteria in the bill. No discretion, no use of environmental laws that are inevitably going to be abused, no hearings, appeals, lawsuits. It's simply approved, and the city will have 3 to 6 months to issue the permit. San Francisco has experience with these kinds of streamlined approval processes. Another law that I authored, SB35, back in 2017, San Francisco has utilized, or builders have utilized that law for thousands of new homes, overwhelmingly affordable in San Francisco, and the planning department has gotten accustomed to how to implement that law. So I think that we will see it being well implemented here. The homes have to be sort of subsidized below market rate homes. They typically have to be below 80% of area median income. The builder can do up to 20% of those homes can be moderate income housing, 80 to 120% of area median income, but the average can be no higher than 80%. We know that state affordable housing funding streams create a big incentive to have deeper affordability, more like 30 to 50% of area median income. So that'll probably be a lot of what we'll see. Development does not move quickly. I think a lot of churches, et cetera, that may want to do this, some of them are ready to go, like the St. Mark's of the world, but some are going to have to really go through their own internal process and do an evaluation and really do a financial analysis and try to partner with a affordable housing builder. So it's going to take time. And what we see with these laws is they tend to start out for the first few years really, really slow. And everyone's like, oh my God, nothing's happening. But that's because everyone's just figuring it out. And then it starts accelerating. And we've seen that with other state housing laws, and I think we will see it here. So I'm really excited about this. I want to thank our amazing coalition of housing advocates and faith institutions and labor unions, including the carpenters and the laborers and operating engineers and cement masons and SEIU and the state School Employee Association. So it's just been inspiring. And again, thank you so much for the support.
Senator, thank you. And it was a joyous day yesterday at St. Mark's when we celebrated the signing and your efforts over 3 years. And again, I want to thank you for your patience and your perseverance. We have a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Pastor Odette, would you kick us off? I know that the senator has come to your facility and has given some encouragement, but I know that you have a couple of questions, so off you go.
Yeah. Thank you again, Senator. So grateful to you and for all the people who work. Now, how will SB4 make it easier for religious communities of all sizes to build housing on their land, in particular in relationship to the funding streams that may or may not be happening for the level of affordability that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, this bill does not solve every problem, remove, it doesn't address everything. This is about dealing with the zoning and the approval permitting issues, which are big ones. And so that's what it does. This is not a funding bill, so this doesn't increase the funding. We've done a lot of work in recent years to significantly increase state funding. We're going to be, and we protected those funds during the recent budget challenges we've had. There's going to be a regional housing bond next year, and a city housing bond next year. So I think we'll see increases in affordable housing funding, but it's never going to be, well, hopefully not never, but in the foreseeable future, it's not going to be as high as we would like.
And a second question, where can faith communities seek guidance, a roadmap, or navigation hub for what is possible at this point and moving forward as the figuring it out that you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most faith institutions, because they're not housing land use development experts, it's going to make sense to partner with probably one of the nonprofit affordable housing builders. And we have some amazing ones in San Francisco, like Mercy Housing and Chinatown Community Development Center and Mission Housing and Bridge Housing and TNDC and so on and so forth. Some really strong, experienced nonprofit affordable housing builders. There are also, it probably makes sense to consult with a lawyer who specializes in affordable housing, land use matters. So there are experts that you can consult with early on to figure out what might make sense.
We have from Deb White, who's in the room. She says, we are in the midst of developing and are considering building more units than anticipated. That's a good thing. Now that SB4 is in effect, does the city have any say over the height of our development?
No. So the SB4 is keyed off of local height limits. The presumptive local height limit in San Francisco is 40 feet. Although it's taller in some areas. It's very rare that it's less than that in San Francisco. The bill basically allows you to go 2 stories over the local height limit. So that would be 4 stories is typically going to get you 40 feet is typically going to get you 4 stories. It might only be 3, but you can go 2 above that. Also, the state density bonus applies. So I would, consult with a land use lawyer about what the exact zoning is, what SB4 density bonus will allow, and they can tell you what the sort of range is in terms of what you can do. It's going to sort of vary.
Now from Malcolm Gisson, we hear there is a tremendous need for housing for elderly incarcerated people, especially those with health challenges. Many more seniors would be released from prison if there was a place to send them. Can we get appropriation from the legislature to build housing for these folks?
Well, we need more housing for people who are being released from prison so we can have stronger reentry programs. That's absolutely true for seniors, but it's also true for younger people being released. So we've dedicated billions and billions of new dollars from the state general fund for affordable housing in the last few years, and I'm fully supportive of increasing investment for reentry housing.
Pastor Odette?
Yes, one of the questions is what it took 3 attempts, as you said, to pass this bill. What were some of the challenges and what were some of the changes in the resultant bill?
The biggest challenge, I'll be honest, what was challenges around labor and the building trades, who wanted certain labor standards in the bill that were not realistic. And so that was really a problem for us. And ultimately, the carpenters worked with us, and and came to us with strong labor standards that were much more feasible. And then other unions aligned with the carpenters to say, hey, of course we want labor standards. We want to make sure that our construction workers are able to join the middle class. But we want standards that aren't going to make it often impossible to actually build the project.
From Alexa Tour. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a follow-up?
Well, just one other question that came was, can you say just a bit more to explain the 80%, 20%? It's 100% affordable, but there are 2 tiers in that are possible within this bill?
Yeah, so everything has to be below market rate. So the average area median income for the homes can't be higher than 80%. You can do up to 1/5 of the homes can be in that 80 to 120% of area median income, but then you have to have other homes that are lower to make sure that the average does not go above 80%.
Wonderful, thank you.
From Aletta Tour, according to AB 3121 reparations legislation, will devastated, displaced Black communities prioritize Black churches and mosques and religious institutions?
The bill does not, well, first of all, the bill is, I'll say it again, the bill is not a funding bill. This bill does not provide money. This bill does rezoning and provides expedited permitting. So everyone, every church, mosque, synagogue, nonprofit colleges will be able to use that. There's no limit to who can use it. In terms of funding, what I will say is that another bill that I authored this year that the governor signed, Senate Bill 593, is a bill that allows, it's specific to San Francisco, and it gives a financing tool to San Francisco to replace the 6,000 affordable homes that have not yet been replaced and that were destroyed during redevelopment in the Fillmore and Japantown and parts of Soma that devastated, where we had just mass demolition, devastating our Black community, our Japanese American community, our Filipino community from the 50s to the 70s. And San Francisco has a legal obligation to replace the homes that it bulldozed. And it did for some, but then redevelopment ended and that financing tool went away. And so we've now created a new financing tool for San Francisco to be able to deliver those 6,000 affordable homes. That is being managed by OCII, the Office of Community Initiatives and Investment. I can't remember the exact words. And so I would recommend connecting with OCII because they were the force behind the bill. And that is intended to directly get at what you're asking about the horrors and devastations that were inflicted on Black and other communities in San Francisco during redevelopment, displacing so many people, and our moral obligation to do right by those communities.
Reverend Penny Nixon read my mind. Will SB4 apply to congregations that want to build the ground floor for community services or meeting rooms, and then the rest of the floors for affordable housing units?
Yes. Yeah. So the bill allows for up to 1/3 of the space to be used for non-residential. Community serving is really always allowed. For retail, it would only be allowed if it's in a commercial or mixed-use area. So if you're in the middle of residential, you couldn't put like a supermarket there, but you could do community space, childcare, health center, so forth.
Reverend Odette?
Yes, nonprofit colleges were included in SB4 and along with religious institutions. Can you say a word about that? And also, are you expecting to see similar paths? And what kind of timeline do you see for other community institutions through future legislation?
Yeah, when we started the bill back in 2020, it was just faith institutions. SEIU came to us and asked for nonprofit colleges to be included, and the reason is SEIU represents a large number of low-wage workers at nonprofit colleges, and so they want these colleges to have the ability to build basically workforce housing for these low-wage workers on their land. So that was the genesis of why nonprofit colleges went in. There are certainly other institutions that could receive what SB4 has provided, such as K through 12 schools, or maybe other kinds of nonprofits. I know the YMCA had expressed interest. For a variety of reasons, we weren't able to write that into the bill. And there is a concern about if you go all nonprofits, because we know that there is a spectrum of nonprofits, and there are nonprofits that are not as reputable as others, like there are nonprofits that tried to overthrow the government on January 6th, 2021. So we were, even though we considered just saying all nonprofits, that was not going to fly because of the vast range of nonprofits. And so the YMCA, I know, is interested, and I would like them to be able to do it. But it's a way of figuring out how to craft that kind of definition.
One of the questions that's on the mind of a lot of faith institutions is, will churches have full control over the pricing of the new housing units on their land?
So it has to be below market rate at the area median incomes that I mentioned, and so that they won't have full control, but within those parameters, they will. It's based on someone's income.
Okay, Pastor Odette.
So in relationship to the density, and the need for housing statewide and in the city of San Francisco and the mandates, and also the need for public spaces and green spaces. And there are so many things coming together at this moment. And as a longtime resident and leader in San Francisco and now statewide, what's your read about San Francisco at this particular moment, and how this can help with public spaces as well as with housing in San Francisco?
Well, I mean, of course we want public space, and there's been we have a lot of public space in San Francisco. Our park system is amazing and ample. And people have great access to our park system. We've created quite a few great public spaces, and I think that will continue. But we need to be very, very clear. I'm a big proponent of public space, but let's be crystal clear. We need to stop deprioritizing housing. And forever we have said, well, public space, or there's this, or there's all these other things that are more important than building enough. I'm not going to curse because we're in a religion. I'm not going to say the D word. Enough D housing, and we have driven the car into the. Everything is more important than housing. Everything. That's how it's been for 50 years. That housing is always deprioritized. It's like an afterthought. All these other things you have to do, and all these other costs you have to incur. And if there's anything left, then you can do some housing. And what has that gotten us? The middle class can't afford to live in San Francisco anymore. People are living in their cars. 2,500 San Francisco Unified School District children are waking up not in a home. 2,500. It is a moral catastrophe. It's a public health catastrophe. It's an economic problem. We're strangling ourselves economically by saying to the workforce, you're not welcome here anymore. You're welcome to commute in 2 hours, but you're not welcome to live here anymore. That's what we've done because we've said everything is more important. So yes, I'm a huge proponent of public space, and I've done a lot of work on that when I was on the board of supervisors. I've delivered a lot of funding from the state to public space projects. And so I'm all in for more public space. But we also, and I'm not suggesting that you're saying this, we also need to avoid saying that housing is somehow subsidiary to that, because that's really the attitude that a lot of people in San Francisco and elsewhere have taken. And I want to move away from that. What I do know is that so many of our affordable housing projects in San Francisco built beautiful public space, like if you go 55 Laguna or other places, just really beautiful public space. And I think when people build housing, they want it to be a great place to live for their residents. And so I'm confident that that will happen.
Not unrelated to this, but the Reverend Anna Rossi from Grace Cathedral asked, thinking of food security and new housing, if grocery stores can't be added because of zoning, does the community provision allow for farmers markets and community-based agriculture, or is that considered commercial?
Well, farmers market, I don't know the answer to that. I suspect if you're going to do a farmer's market, you're going to have to probably get a permit to do that. So it would be separate from this, I think. I think you should definitely look at the language of the bill. I think it was more intended for things like communities, like more like childcare, community rooms, health services. So yeah, but double check me on that. I can't answer that definitively.
I'd like to go back to the previous question and use language and just say amen to what you were saying about housing being deprioritized. And the other thing that I've observed is the conversation about pitting those who are most vulnerable, who have greatest need for shelter and a home and a community and public space, against those who are in the workforce, and not allowing that division, that pit to happen in legislation or in funding.
Yeah, and and the good thing about this bill is it opens up so much land that there's plenty of for everyone. And so, but it's when you look at San Francisco, when we talk about, let's say 50% of area median income, which is considered the high end of very low income, that's like, if you're a single person, that's someone who's making over $40,000 a year, $45,000 a year, right? That we would consider typically to be, someone who used to be, that would be enough to be in the middle class. Now it's, we might call it working class, but it's considered very low income under the law. And so the good thing is, if you look at the affordable housing that is being built, which is really dictated by funding streams in a lot of ways, so much of it is for the poorest of the poor. We want to build for folks who are formerly homeless or very low income or extremely low income and at risk of being homeless, of course. We also want to build for folks who are in the workforce and just have no housing options. And we don't want those people to have to move away.
I'm keeping an eye on the clock because I know we have you till 9:15, but related to what you just said, the senator has, this is from Diane Lawrence, the senator has referenced percentages of average income for the area. How are these determined? And is there a table that can help unpack the information and figures? Yeah,
so the state sets, or I don't know if it's every year. I think it must be every year, maybe it's every few years, I don't know. Sets the area median income. It's by county, typically by county. And so there's a area median income for each county. I'm not sure. I don't know if it might be the Department of Finance. I'm not sure, but it should be easily findable on the state website. I'm sure if you just start Googling it, California area median income by county, I bet you it'll come right up.
I was gonna, as I was driving home yesterday, you got a big shout out on KQED for all of your efforts. I was wondering, what are some of the procedural roadblocks? You know San Francisco better than any of us, or delays that SB4 addresses to speed up the development process here?
Sure. So you may have seen yesterday, about a year after the Board of Supervisors illegally blocked the Stevenson Street project. You may remember that from a couple years ago, 500 homes on a valet parking lot right by the Nordstrom right by BART, 20% affordable, all union labor, and the board abused environmental laws to reject that project. The state of California, our state housing department, initiated an unprecedented top to bottom review of all of San Francisco's housing policies to see if they were legal. It turns out they're completely illegal. We have a system designed to choke off housing. Every permit is discretionary. Every project, even if it fits within the zoning, is a political football. If you meet normally in any system of good government, the government sets out the rules ahead of time. And if you meet all the rules, you check all the boxes, you get your permit, whether it's to open a new business or build a home or to do whatever it is that you need permission from the government to do. That's good government. In San Francisco, if you meet all of the rules that the government has set out, the height, the density, everything else, you meet all the rules, check all the boxes, and say, hey, you zoned it for these 10 things. I have these things in this project. I'd like a permit. That doesn't get you your permit. That just gives you permission to enter the political arena, to have a political war about whether that project is going to get approved or not approved or cut in half, or money will be extracted out of you. It's really outrageous. It's government at its worst. It absolutely can lead to corruption, and it has led to corruption at times. And that's what San Francisco has set up with all sorts of this Byzantine system work. It takes in San Francisco, the average amount of time to get a permit for housing is 3 years. That is 1 year longer than the second longest city in California. That's how bad it is here. And the proof is in the pudding. We're producing very little housing. And I'm not saying this is the only reason. Obviously we're in a tough economy now, interest rates are high. So I'm not suggesting there's only one explanation, but this is certainly one of the reasons why there are people who are like, I don't even want to build housing there because I don't want to have to go through political warfare just to be able to follow the rules.
Your passion.
Yesterday, the housing department came out with its report on San Francisco, which was an absolute indictment of San Francisco's system. And I was just say, I mean, the bills that we've been able to pass include SB4, another one I passed this year, SB423, a few other laws are going to help. But ultimately, San Francisco has to change its system. The Board of Supervisors, when it passed its housing element, which was a state required housing plan for the next 8 years, agreed to a number of reforms. The mayor has now sent legislation to the board saying, okay, let's now follow through and adopt those reforms. And the Board of Supervisors, not all of them, but some are balking at doing that, which is illegal. It's a violation of the law, and that is going to have profound legal consequences if the board fails to do its duty. It's just, there are some real problems that have to be fixed.
We have time for one last question, Pastor Odette.
Yeah, I just want to, for those of us on this call, for the many others who will see this recording, what would you, in your counsel and wisdom, what would you say would be the next steps for interfaith community to do a deep dive on the implications and to work together? Obviously, the legislation in terms of funding that you talked about that will be coming next year. Are there other things that we need to attend to? Because sometimes our attention is what is required in advocacy and education.
Well, I think that the interfaith community that was built around SB4 should continue. I hope it doesn't, unravel just because this big bill was passed. I think there's other work to be done. The Jewish Public Affairs Committee, JPAC, played a leading role in organizing not all but segments of the faith community, and so that's probably a good group to stay in touch with. David Carsley is their executive director, but I do hope that the coalition sticks together because I think it's a powerful one and could do a lot more good work.
I said I would be faithful to the time. It is 9:15. Senator, I just wanted to say that Lori Manning said, preach it. Your passion is great. And I know that if on a Sunday, perhaps you can preach at Park Presidio. But we thank you, and we thank you for this gift that you've given us and for your continued support of our interfaith efforts.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your amazing work and allyship.
Excellent. Stay tuned for news of future briefings. We look forward to reconvening soon. And bless you all, and have a beautiful week.